Hi, welcome back. We're now down to the last video in our section about implementing business processes within Salesforce.com. So approvals are an important business process within any organization. With approval processes in Salesforce, we can create automated processes for approving records that an organization can build through configuration. So there are basically 3 steps in creating approval processes within Salesforce. First, we can specify the process details as well as the entry criteria, which specifies which records are going to be included in the process. Next, we would be able to create the approval steps after submission. So this steps details which users would approve the records submitted for approval. And then the final step would be indicating different actions upon either approval, rejection, or recall of a record. These actions are the same actions that can be attached to workflow rules. So in this example, we'll be creating an approval process for any contract under the international branch of Mojo Electronics. In this process, only contracts owned by an international user would be included. The contract would then have to be approved by the sales director for international and then by the CEO. There would be no partial approval or rejections. A contract would have to be approved by both, and a rejection from one would mean a complete rejection for the whole record. Finally, our process would then send notifications in the form of email alerts either on approval or rejection of a record. So to start off, let's enter the process details. So let's go to the Salesforce setup menu, go to Create, under Build, click on Workflow and Approvals, and click on Approval Processes. So first, let's select the object where we want the approval process to work on. So let's select Contract. So first, let's click on Create New Approval Process. So for this example, we'll be using the standard wizard to help you get the full grasp of what an approval process is in Salesforce. So first, let's enter the process name and unique name. So let's just enter Contract Approval Process. Let's retain the unique name for this approval process and click on Next to proceed. Next, we're going to specify the entry criteria for this approval process. First, let's specify that we want to use a formula instead of a criteria. So let's select Formula Evaluates to True. And then we're going to build our actual criteria. So to start off, we'll be using the record owner's country as the basis. So let's add the field to the formula by using the simple wizard and click Add Field. Select Contract Owner. Then select Country. Insert. Let's select the operator not equal and select either US. So we just want to copy this formula and create an OR condition. So this means that either of the following terms used for USA would trigger an entry criteria. So would trigger entry into the approval process. So since we're validating on a text field, which could have any values for US, could either mean US, USA, or United States of America, let's just cover all our bases in this entry criteria. So first, let's check syntax to validate that our syntax is correct. So there you have it. We don't have any errors in it. So let's click on Next to proceed further. So next, we will be asked for approver details. Since we can skip creation of the approval steps and records automatically to managers as specified in the manager field of the user. For this example, we don't want that, and we will be creating approval steps manually by our own. So let's select None for that. On record editability properties, select the first option, meaning that the creators of the contracts cannot edit the records once they send it for approval. So let's click on Next. So that effectively locks out the record for editing. So next, select the available fields in the approval page layout. So for this example, we'll be simply selecting all the fields available. Let's click on Select All, click Add. Next, we're asked if we want to display approval history information. So since we want that, let's just click on that. So next, on security settings, let's select the second option, which allows approvers to access the approval page from all channels within Salesforce, both for the web interface and the mobile interface. So let's click on Next. The next process, we will be selecting which user can submit the record. For example, we can add a role, let's say VP of International Sales, add them to the role. So this basically gives any user under that role the ability to submit any contract that they have access to. So next, let's select the Add Approval History Related List to all contract page layouts. So this means that the approval history list will be displayed on all contract page layouts existing in the system. Next, we're going to allow submitters to recall approval requests. So let's check that as well. And click on Save to finalize our approval process. So that's it. We will be creating the steps for the approval process. So for the example, we'll be creating a two-step process approval, meaning that the records would be sent to our international sales director and then afterwards to our CEO. So there would be no partial approvals or rejections for this process. So first, let's navigate and go to the section entitled Approval Steps. Let's click on New Approval. So first, let's enter the name and the unique name for our approval process step. So Approval Request International. And select our step number, which would be number 1. Next, we're going to select all records should enter this step. Alternatively, we can enter our criteria instead of allowing overrides to the process. So let's just select all records should enter the step for this example. Let's click on Next. So next, select Automatically Assign to Approver, and then select User, and select Mike Murphy, which is Head of International Sales. Let's check the following checkbox, which indicates that the approver's delegate can also approve this request. Next, we can select whether we want a unanimous approval from all selected approvers. So that's a thing we want. So let's select that one. Click on Save. So let's select No, I'll do this later. So next, let's click on New Approval Step again to create another step. This time, an approval process going to the CEO. So for step number, let's indicate number 2. So let's select all records should enter the step and select our user and select require unanimous approval from all selected approvers. So for the reject behavior, we want this step to be the final rejection process. So meaning that the CEO rejects this particular contract. This means that this reject the whole record and send all related rejection actions with it. So select that option and click on Save. So let's click on No. So after creating our steps, you would need to enter the actions triggered after contract approval or contract rejection. So to start off, let's create an approval action by clicking on Add New. So we're going to assign that to international. So we're creating a new task for any approved contracts. So let's select Role and select International Sales. Let's enter Notify Client as the subject of this new task. So this means that the international sales team would be assigned a task instructing them to notify the client that the contract has been approved and is now in effect. So let's enter other details like the due date. So let's select contract start date plus 5 days. So that's the due date for notifying the client, and select in progress as the status, the priority being high. And then finally we'll select notify assignee, meaning that the assignee will be notified when the task is assigned to them. So just as a note, all approval and rejection actions are similar to the workflow actions that we created earlier. So for example, you can either create a task, an email alert, or a field update for approval action. So for the rejection action, we can do the same. We can create a new task, email alert, field update, or outbound message. So let's create a new task as well and assign it to international sales again. The subject, notify client of rejection. Retain the unique name and select the due date. So let's select the contract created date plus 30 days. Select in progress and priority as low. Click on notify assignee as well and click on save to finalize. So that's it. We have just completed our approval process. So we created our initial submission actions, our approval steps, and finally our approval and rejection actions. So with this section, we have learned about approval process and how to create them. Using approval processes, we can create complex approval processes using only configuration, and it is dynamic enough to be changed in relation to changing business needs. So just as a recap, in this video, we have discussed the following. First, the creation of the actual approval process details and specifying entry criteria and initial submission actions. Next, we discussed about creating approval steps, and then finally specifying final approval and rejection actions. So that's it for our section within business process. Next up would be about Salesforce CRM functions and how we can configure them to your business.